Hey everybody, it's Julie. Welcome back to my channel. It's exciting times today because we got a brand new release over at ellenhudson.com, and one of my favorite products is the Never Ending Fringe Dies. As you can see, I've used it to make fringe backgrounds and fun tassels for my gift packages, but I was really stoked when I figured out I could use the large one to make these super cool rainfall or rain shaker cards. So I took some strips of cardstock. These were 1/2 inch by 4 1/4, but you could also do 1/2 inch by 5 1/2 inches if you're doing a landscape layout on your card. And I'm thinking A2 because that's typical standard card size here in the US. And I'm just going to use a little bit of that purple tape to anchor them in place and then send those through my die cutting machine. And once I'm done, I'm going to have two like stubby fringes. It's not really fringe anymore because they're too short. So now I'm going to take a strip of foam mounting tape and I just cut this. They're about 1/8 inch wide by however long I needed to go across that. And I just eyeballed it. I wasn't trying to measure because none of this is going to be seen. No one's going to know. So it doesn't have to be pretty, right? And I butted those up against where those cut lines or those notches, I'm going to call them notches now, where those notches end. And then I had some excess overhanging out there, so I'm going to take some long blade scissors and trim that off because they are 1/2 inch tall. But I made a die cut frame. So I took a 1/4 sheet of cardstock and I used one of the Essentials rectangle dies to make a 1/2 inch all the way around frame that's going to go on the front of my card. And these need to be hidden behind that. So that's why I trimmed them down. Now, if your frame is chunkier than that, you probably won't have to trim anything down. So anyway, I love the fact that I have the versatility to do that with these. So now I'm going to just make sure that with all my trimming, these are going to fit the way I want them to. And the edges are going to, of those notches, are going to hang outside. So I've got a panel I've already prepared that's going to be the base for my rainfall. And I used some blending brushes and Catherine Pooler dye inks to blend a background, and then I stamped over the top the cool water ring from the Just Squidding stamp set that's also releasing today. It's so cute. And now I'm just going to double check and make sure I've trimmed enough along those short ends there that everything's going to be hidden behind my frame. And then I can go ahead and remove the liner paper from those notches and get those mounted in place. Now I'm going to set them up so that the foam tape is right along the edge there and the notches are overhanging, but everything is still going to be hidden by the frame. So I just wanted you to see how those are positioned, and the notches are overhanging the edge of that. And there, when I pop the frame on, I'm just double checking just to make sure, because it's better to know now than later. Ask me how I know. So now I'm going to take some thread. This is that silver metallic thread I love so much. I'm always making messy nests with it. And I've got some seed beads. And I'm just going to cut a long length of this and go ahead and wrap it around the first notch I wanted to start with. And you don't have to go all the way to the end because you got to think about what's going to actually be seen, right, through the frame. So I knew that the furthest one was not going to be seen, so don't start there. And then I'm just going to tape it to the back to secure it. And then when you slide it into that notch, it will kind of wedge it there and hold it in place for you. And then I'm going to take some seed beads and start threading them onto my needle. Now you want to make sure that you're working with a needle that has an eye that is small enough to go through the holes on these beads. So I had a really small needle that I've used for like repairing garments or, hemming things. And it's got a very small, delicate eye, and it'll go through these 2.2 millimeter beads. Or these are also called like a size 11. And so you don't want to go any smaller than this, or you'll have a heck of a time, finding a needle. You'll have to go actually hunt for a needle that'll be able to go through something that tiny. But this was just kind of a set of cheap needles I got off Amazon, and they work great for this. So they're very skinny. So now I'm just going to thread all the beads on I want. I did not count. I just threaded a bunch of them on there at one time. And I'm going to take that thread and wrap it down through the notch at the opposite end and then come around the back side of it and up through the next one. So I'm just looping it around the back side and coming up the front side of the next notch. And then I'm going to thread some more beads with my needle onto my thread here and do the same thing. I will pull it tight up to the next notch. And you don't want to pull it so tight that you're warping that panel, but you do want it snug. Like you don't want to have it slack so it looks kind of, wobbly. You want to keep it snug, not super tight, just snug enough that it stays straight and those beads can slide easily up and down. And you want to make sure, like, push your beads to the middle of the thread there so that they're not actually on top of those notches when you're trying to determine how tightly you need to pull that thread. So I'm just going to continue on my merry way. Now, at one point you'll see me, or you may have already seen me, have a bead that was too small, or the hole was too small for the needle to actually go through. So what I did is I just slid that bead right back off, and you can either toss it or throw it in another container and save it for some other project where you maybe will have a needle that has an eye small enough to get through it. So that's your call. So now I'm just going to keep on going, continuing all the way across, just threading these. And like I said, you don't need to count the beads, just what looks good. And there you can see my beads kind of went all the way down to the bottom of the thread, so I pushed them up out of the way of that notch so that I made sure that it wasn't interfering with how tightly I'm pulling that thread and getting it nice and taut. So when you get to the very end and you got everything on there, you just flip it over to the back side on that last notch that you wanted to use and add another piece of tape to secure it. So now everything's on there really nice and secure. I'm going to take another piece of foam mounting tape. This is only maybe a 1/4 inch wide. Like I said, I just eyeballed it. You're not going to see any of this. This part will all be hidden, so it doesn't have to look all pretty or anything like that. Now, at the top, I've got enough foam tape there for my panel, but I don't have any on the side. So I took my foam tape and I folded it on itself and stuck it on itself to make a double layer of foam tape. And then I can go ahead and cut that into skinny strips, and it will be the same depth or height as the other pieces I have on there, so that my panel, when I put it on the top, it will be nice and it'll have support, even support, all the way around the perimeter there. And you'll see what I mean. I'm going to get the other side mounted. And there you can see I've got all the tape on there. I can go ahead and pull away the liners. I like to do that partially. I don't like to remove them completely, because then, like right now, when I'm not getting it on straight, I have a little bit of fudge room. And I can just kind of play around with that, lift it up without destroying all my work up to this point. And get it anchored on there. And now I can remove the rest of those liner papers and it's completely secure. Now I'm going to take this and put double-sided sticky tape on the back of the panel and mount the whole thing to a standard A2 card front. So that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. Everything fits, everything's flush, and just remove the liner papers. And there we go. So no one will ever know that you got a separate piece of cardstock that created your background there. But isn't that fun how they slide up and down those metallic threads? Now I grabbed the Essentials flat bottom dies and cut a couple of cloud shapes there, and I'm going to mount those to the top. Now I did add foam tape. In hindsight, later on, I decided I didn't like having them 3D mounted. I felt it added too much bulk to the cards, so I actually removed them off camera and remounted them with just tape runner so that they were flush to that frame. But just, that's up to you. That's your call. But it was getting kind of chunky there. So anyway, you can flip that over and then trim them flush with a pair of long blade scissors, and then they'll line up perfectly with your card. And then to mount my adorable little octopus from the Just Squidding set, she's already been colored, so I stamped her and colored her with alcohol markers, and I'll give you a link to that coloring tutorial so you can see how I did that. I just didn't want to do it in this video or it'd make this one run way too long. So now I'm going to take her and get her mounted there. And I cut these little skinny strips of foam tape where I wanted to mount her. And I put those in between those threads. And I just wanted to make sure they were skinny enough for those beads to not be impeded. But when I went to add the umbrella, I didn't trim them quite as skinny. And so next time around, I will make sure that I do them skinny enough that they don't get blocked. Like they don't block the beads from going back and forth. But I had to borrow the umbrella from the Bearwear set to add for my little scene here because it's pouring rain, right? When it rains, it pours. So you got to shower the people you love with love, right? I've been singing that song all day ever since I made this card. And always put your stickles last if you want to add a little bit of sparkle. Ask me how I know. Some of you that haven't added it last, you know why. All right, I hope you got some fun ideas for the never ending fringe die, and thanks for watching.